The fear that business owners experience or entrepreneurs experience, it's always really the obsession with control. You have to get clear about what you can control in your business and what you can't control. So almost all the higher roles that I work with and have anxiety about their business or entrepreneurship, they're obsessed with control. And so that obsession drives you crazy, because if you want to focus on what you can't control and you want to try to control it, good luck. Like, you're going to drive yourself crazy and you're going to get anxiety, right?
You found your way to the Winning Tactics podcast with host Adam Sinkus. Adam discusses winning tactics with small business owners and entrepreneurs, uncovering processes and introducing the tools and solutions for enhancing the bottom line. Thanks again for finding your way to the Winning Tactics podcast. And now your host, Adam Sinkus.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is another wonderful, wonderful week of the Winning Tactics podcast. I'm excited today because we're talking about something that I think a lot of times people push off into the back of their mind, into those dark, scary places, and, are afraid to talk about. To me, it's really about, that fear of what people will think about you because you have it. And to let the cat out of the bag, we're talking about anxiety today. And I am super, super excited to have Bibi on the show. Bibi, welcome to the show. I think this is such an important topic that just doesn't get talked about in the business world, really in the world in general. But before we dive into it, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I'm Bibi. I'm an anxiety coach, and I run a program that helps professionals end anxiety permanently.
Fantastic. And, I think it's important to point out, you're talking about not just finding ways to just cope with it and put a Band-Aid over it. You're talking about flat out, just get rid of it, move on, and be excited, right?
No managing it, healing it fully.
I think it's interesting though, because I think regardless of who we are, regardless of how we cope with stressors in life, we all have moments of anxiety, but I think there's a lot of people that can handle those moments, and there's a lot of people that get overwhelmed by those moments. So I'd love to kind of dive into this and start talking about really what causes anxiety, because I think it's important to recognize at least that before we dive into how do we work through it.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point, because with anxiety, we have the normal daily fight or flight, healthy anxiety, but what I deal with more and what I'm always talking about are the anxiety disorders. So that's really when your thoughts become obsessive, you create phobias, you overthink, you over obsess, you over want to control. Your thoughts and fears start to rule your life, and that's where you can really notice there is a problem. What causes anxiety? So many things can cause anxiety. Anxiety disorders are usually a buildup of traumas or negative experiences or just situations that have taken place, and people make a decision and they live on those decisions and they run with those decisions and create their whole life around them. So that could be social, it could be health related, it could be something as simple as fear of saying no, fear of the unknown, so many different things. But there's always a root cause for why you're having that certain type of anxiety, for sure.
I think it's interesting, right? You eventually got to fear, right? And that's at least, in what I've read and like the articles that I see about it, fear seems to be a leading driver of it. But there's so many more things that you also mentioned that also contribute to it and become a part of it. And what I liked is that you noted a difference between people that have anxiety in situations and a disorder, because I think that's important, important distinction to make, because everybody has anxious
Yes, it's
moments.
an emotion, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are a lot of people that don't know how to move past that emotion, and they
Right.
get
The
stuck.
anxiety rules their life, right? Controls them, consumes them. That's the type of anxiety that I think definitely needs to be healed for anyone who's experiencing, not managed, because you don't have to manage it. You can heal it, but do the work to really get to healing it.
Yeah, what one of the things, you mentioned fear, and I think fear is a big thing that a lot of business owners especially experience, and by no fault of their own, right? Because we are constantly evaluating risk and evaluating how we're going to move forward in our business, and what happens if this deal doesn't happen, and I've got all these people to pay, and all those stressors that come in. How do we start to overcome that fear? How do we start to really build I guess in a way a tolerance to managing that fear?
The fear that business owners experience or entrepreneurs experience, it's always really the obsession with control. You have to get clear about what you can control in your business and what you can't control. So almost all the higher roles that I work with and have anxiety about their business or entrepreneurship, they're obsessed with control. And so that obsession drives you crazy, because if you want to focus on what you can't control and you want to try to control it, good luck. Like, you're going to drive yourself crazy and you're going to get anxiety, right? Because you just can't. So it's a lot of working through accepting that you can't control everything. And then, like a really good exercise would be when a situation takes place and you can now notice, oh, you're obsessing about this, is take a paper out, write what you can control about it and what you can't control about it. Then you can see it on paper, and you're not going to waste your energy on what you can't control, because, well, you can sit there and think about it for 10,000 hours, but you can't control it.
I love that. That paper, writing it down on a piece of paper, is something that I do all the time. I am constantly writing lists down, like my to-do list, and I literally will start I'll just brain dump like absolutely everything. And then I kind of use a 3-tier method in my approach, but it works on the same premise. It's the things I can control, the things I can't control, and the things I shouldn't worry about, because I think we put a lot of those things in there. I can't worry about whether it's going to rain today or not. Even if my business was outside, I can't control it, and I'm not going to be able to change it. So why should I be worried about it?
Yeah. And a lot of times you can actually mess up your business by this obsession with control or obsessing about outcomes. Like, you have to be able to detach from the outcome in your business, right? Like, be mission-based, don't be money-based. When you're money-based, you get a lot of blockages. When you're mission-based, it's like doors open for you. And I've experienced that for sure firsthand. Like, I never worry about getting a client, ever. Like, yeah, I'm running a business on my own. I should worry about that, but I never ever worry about it, because I know my mission is right. My motive is right. The reason I wake up, it's not to make money. Yes, of course I need money, but that's not why I wake up. I wake up because I have a mission to serve, right? And so when you can get clarity about these things and be certain in what you're doing, you can do a lot of good for your business.
That is such a powerful statement. Figure out why you're waking up in the morning to do it, right? Because I spend a lot of time on small business forums and Facebook. It's kind of a guilty pleasure to watch some of the fake entrepreneurs that are in them that talk about, what are you going to do to get your next $1 million? What are you going to do? Who's got a goal of having $1 million this year? And I'm looking at these people that are running like essentially the equivalent of a t-shirt shop out of the trunk of their car on a half-baked e-commerce site, talking about how they're going to make their first $1 million. I'm like, well, that's great. I'd love to make $1 million in a year, but if it costs me $950,000 to make that $1 million and I didn't grow from the experience, what am I really doing here?
Right.
And so, like, I've always, like you, I need clients, right? Everybody needs clients or needs to sell their widget or whatever it is. But if you understand why you're selling what you sell, I think your product becomes ultimately way more powerful to the people that receive it.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you're having, those phone conversations and stuff. If you're on the phone from a place of money, the other person knows it. They can feel it. You sound fake. You sound desperate. But when you're on the phone from a place of mission, you sound caring. You sound authentic. You sound real. And you're trustworthy, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why, again, that all taps back into anxiety. A lot of people create anxiety for themselves and their business because they're so money focused. Like, oh my God, where's the next check coming? Where's the next client? Where's the next money? And that is all to your disadvantage.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the other thing to point out in that, right, is now you've created a potential situation of anxiety for the person that you're trying to sell to as well. Yeah. Because now you're talking about high pressure sales. You're talking about this like level of frustration that they get. I don't know about you. I get pitched like 10, 15 times a day on LinkedIn for crap that I don't need, nor would I ever consider buying. And, it's frustrating. Like, I'm like, what the heck am I doing that all these people want to, ping me for this crap that I don't need? And so now I honestly, I can say I sometimes have trust issues with the way people, approach sales online.
Yeah. It's so delicate, right? You have to build rapport and you have to be building trust so delicately and so gentle because they don't know you. Why should they buy from you? Why would they buy from you, right?
Mm-hmm. And then when they do buy from you, if you can break some of those barriers down and they do buy from you, now that whole buying experience becomes very nerve-wracking for them because you haven't truly built the trust and authority that you need in that space to make the relationship truly cohesive. So I think that's a really, really cool and interesting call out. So I want to step back because you mentioned fight or flight earlier, which I think is a key priority in how it is how we handle everything. And I've always been on the fence about, I know psychologically that's how we function, but I've always been on the fence about whether there isn't a third response there that we can choose to have. And it's not the flight. It's not necessarily staying and fighting either, but it's about opening yourself to the situation and being available to consume the situation for what it is and handle it objectively. And so it's like kind of this like third middle ground. I think a lot of leaders spend their time focusing on that how to effectively establish that third middle ground. But what are your thoughts on that?
So I think that the fight or flight anxiety is like if a bear is approaching me, like I better get some sort of anxiety. Something's happening here, or personally me, like I don't like speaking on stage. Like I'll do it fine. But right before I'm about to go on, I'm kind of like, oh, Like I'll feel a little uncomfortable, which that uncomfortable feeling actually makes me do better. It pushes me. I think in those situations, fight or flight is good. But I very much agree that in other situations or in business and in work, just being open about the situation, don't let the situation rule you. Be in charge of the situation, why are you having anxiety about something if it really doesn't need to be there? Like asking yourself probing questions is so powerful, about, no, I'm not talking about bear or going on, even going on stage could be, it could be like, why is it that I get so nervous? Is it that I'm scared to be judged, or, I don't like the sound of my voice, or do I think I look a certain way? So I think we can always choose the third one when it's not an emergency situation. And I think to get to those is asking yourself probing questions gets you really good answers.
That's really interesting, right? I think, I had a guest on a few weeks ago, and it was about video and social media, right? And I think a lot of people get really anxious about putting themselves out on video, and putting video content out. Myself being one of those people, and it's the fear of the unknown judgment, right? Which is ridiculous when you look back. I look back on it now. It's ridiculous. Like at the end of the day, I mean, I do care what people think about me. I don't want people to think I'm a complete imbecile, but I also know that I'm putting my best face forward, and my best face forward says that I'm not. So, what's the harm in putting it out there? There's far worse content than me trying to talk about something educational.
Yeah. And even in that, I think, again, if you're mission driven, you don't care because you've got something important to say to someone out there who needs you. If you're mission, like I'm so mission driven, like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to come on this show with my hair messy and in pajamas, of course, because I like to present myself in a certain way, but I don't necessarily sit here and think, oh my God, what are people thinking of me? I'm thinking about the person that needs my help and is going to hear my voice today and is going to reach out to me because he or she needs me. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So again, if you're mission focused, even in that moment, then fear of judgment kind of goes out the door because you're like, who cares about what I look? It's about them, not about me.
Of course. Yeah. And that's really, I love that it's about them moment, right? Because we make a conscious choice about that in everything we do, whether it's our own business, whether it's our own life, whether we decide we want to start a podcast or start a business or work in somebody else's business. The decision, if you lead with it's about them, it's about the people that I help, it's about the people that I care about, it's about the people that support me. It totally takes that, for me, it takes a lot of that nervousness out because it's no longer about what I'm doing. It's about everybody else around me and doing my best for them.
Yes, totally. I agree.
So let's shift gears because, one of the things that I've always thought is really interesting about anxiety is that it's almost like a 4-letter word. Like mental health disorders in general are like this 4-letter word in the world, right? And, we're so afraid to talk about them. I think oftentimes that we end up doing more harm than good to ourselves and to the people around us. So why can you give us a little bit of background of why it's so important that we open up, even as business owners, and be vulnerable and talk about these moments and the anxiety and even just mental health disorders in general?
It's so important because so many people are dealing with it, and just because someone has an anxiety disorder doesn't make them any less of than any other person, right? I always tell my clients that once they do the work and once they get to being anxiety free, they are so much more than the person without anxiety, because now they've done the work, they have tools, they've done mindset work. Like, they're machines after my program, I always said, and they feel it, right? Whereas the average person, maybe with no anxiety, they don't have anxiety, they don't have to go do the work, right? So anxiety can actually be a blessing if you go after it and tackle it and turn that pain into some sort of a power for yourself, right? And in work environments and in companies, you know, it's sad, but it's like everyone, they start to, well, this year has gotten better thanks to COVID. You know, they're starting to be more open about mental health because they saw how much everyone's going through. But in a lot of companies, it's like people are a number, but it's like, no, these are people, like people with real emotions, people with history, people with trauma. They're real people, you know? And so, yes, it's about like setting goals, getting the job done. I get it. Great. But the stigma that's around mental health is just terrible, because like having a mental health disorder, it's like drinking water or breathing or going to the bathroom. It's like everybody has it one way or another in some form or shape. Some people just have numbed themselves out to it. They think, I'm fine. No, you're not. And some people are bleeding from it. They're like, internally, they're like anxiety, you know, they have bad anxiety, or there's like OCD or so many other things. But it's like, we need to normalize it. And that's why for me, like as on LinkedIn, I try to talk about it so much and put bold messages out. And, you know, I've gotten hate messages on LinkedIn. I don't care. I'm like, whatever, like move aside. This is for the people who need to hear it. Like, but it's important because it should be so much more normalized than this. But people, like a lot of people that I work with, they'll do my program and they don't even want their name on testimonials. Like, they're like, we'll write you the testimonials. I don't have anxiety anymore, but I'm just going to use fake initials, right? Like, the fear is real about the stigma. So.
Yeah, you know, it's frustrating because, like, in one breath, we're like, you know, you hear about it. You have wonderful people like yourself that are preaching the message. You have government organizations that are talking about it more and more now. Yes. TV commercials, all this awareness about it. And we're like, yeah, cool, awareness. It's a great thing. You know, we're all becoming aware of what this is. But in the same breath, you know, it's not any different than the way we treat the person in the wheelchair, the person that, you know, has to use a cane to get around, the person that's blind, you know. And it's this stigma that just because you have a disability or disorder that you are incapable of being a complete, well-rounded, highly productive, efficient and effective person. And, you know, and that couldn't be any further from the truth, because like you mentioned earlier, and I've experienced this with my daughter as well, you know, people with disabilities, they fight through more than we could ever possibly know, and they succeed. And when you see them succeeding, maybe they're not exceeding at the same level that you are, but they're succeeding in life and functioning, and, you know, and what it takes for them just to function is what it takes you to, you know, on your best day with the best set of circumstances.
Yes, totally. And I think it's so messed up. I mean, the thing with stigmas, it's like we want to get rid of them, but then there's a whole wave again of people who are like, I'm not going to talk about it, you know. So for me, it's hard to believe that we'll ever be in a space that anxiety is not a stigma. Like, I remember I did a post about stigmas in general. There was about obesity, you know, there's stigmas around that. There's about people who have lung cancer. They feel like there's a stigma because, oh, they're always smokers or something, or genital herpes. Like, that's like so common. So many people have it, but it's like, it's never talked about because it's like, oh, that person is dirty, you know? So there's all this terrible stigmas out there, and they really don't need to be. But the person who has it feels trapped in this stigma land, and so doesn't talk about it. So the cycle keeps going. So it's like, the more people can talk about it, at least it will help those in suffering, at least reach out and say, you know, I have this, help me.
And I think it's interesting because it's an opportunity to build some community around that. A lot of people talk about finding your tribe, right? And I think it's important that people that are experiencing mental health disorders and anxiety, can find a tribe of people that they can trust and build themselves up with, and it becomes such, it just an important integral piece of them becoming, in some respects, their whole self.
Yeah, it's so important. And for some people, the stigma within themselves is so high that they'll rather never talk about it and die with it and just have it as a big secret, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that breaks my heart. can't even go there.
I know it is such a terrible thing. We are going to pause for just a moment so I can thank my wonderful, wonderful affiliate partner, Cowork Hub Virtual. They are giving consultants, coaches, freelancers, and solopreneurs a sense of work or a sense of place in a remote work world. It is such a cool platform, especially with everything that's going on. And we're talking about anxiety here and opening up communication and talking about things with people that you can help yourself move forward. And this is a platform that in such a remote world has opened doors and opportunities for people to talk and get back to that water cooler chat that I think is really such an important piece of, just belonging and sense of community and place, and so check them out. Really, really cool platform. coworkhubvirtual.com. Let them know you saw it on the Winning Tactics, and you can get your office set up with a free branded background with your company logo. Super cool, super affordable. So we thank them for their support as well. And we are back. We have talked a lot about what causes it, why we talk about it, and we've even dropped a few tips along the way. But I want to dive into how can we help ourselves start to overcome that, and I don't think it's something that we can solely do on our own. I think it's especially with anxiety and a lot of mental health disorders, you need a support system around you. But that being said, I know there's things that we can do to help ourselves down that path a little bit before we even start getting help. So you mentioned the list thing, and we talked a little bit about that. What are some other tips that you provide to help us work through some of those anxiety moments?
Yeah, so I think the anxiety moments, one thing I can recommend is in a business, I think what I see a lot is the obsession with control. So definitely get it on paper. When you get things on paper, you're allowing it to leave your mind. So it's not decluttering again in there. Now it's on paper, it's out of your mind. You can have clarity about it. That for sure will bring your anxiety down. If you're having really anxious moments at work, when it's like reaching to a place of panic, I think you should definitely do diaphragm breathing. So you actually breathe through your nose and you breathe into your belly and not to your chest. And then you hold it for 3 seconds and you breathe out your mouth. You can find amazing YouTube videos on this. But it's amazing. I mean, when I had anxiety, sometimes my anxiety was around the phobia of getting cancer. So I always thought I have cancer. And so I would be at work and I'd be working, my head would hurt and I'm like, oh my God, I have a brain tumor. And it would be serious for me. Like in that moment, I would freak out. So doing this breathing would really bring me back and just ground me again. So I could just be like, okay, I can function, So That's one that's really, really helpful. And it's even good to do it like before you go to bed, first thing when you wake up in the morning. It just kind of settles you down. The other one, I think in a moment of having high anxiety, it's find 3 things you can see, 3 things you can hear, and move 3 body parts. So what that does in that moment is totally interrupts the pattern of your anxiety, because now you have to focus on something else, right? So it brings you right back down. I'm trying to think then what else.
I really like that 3 things.
Yeah, it worked great. It really does. Like you're trying to obsess and it's like, oh.
I chuckle a little bit because like I totally do that, like those kinds of things with like my kids and my dog. Like and it works for behavior modification in those moments. So I can't see why it wouldn't work, in our own brain as well. Like,
it totally breaks patterns in anxiety in that moment. My other really big advice would be news. News is fear injecting.
Mm-hmm.
If you're always watching the news and it's always on in the background, like your subconscious mind is filling up with fear, right? So limit the amount that you watch news. Don't read news right before, when you're in bed, right about to go to sleep. Like, these are all little things that go such a long way in mental health.
Yeah, the news thing is interesting, right? At one point in time, I would watch the morning news as I was sitting, drinking my cup of coffee, and then I watched the evening news, and it got to a point after a while, I'm like, everything is like really, really negative, and it's the same negative stories all over, in the morning, and then the same story is played again in the evening, and they really don't have any new information about it. So why am I watching it? So then I cut down to like watching like one day a week, and then I pretty much, or one time a day. And now I check on the news like once a week, maybe.
Like, I haven't seen the news in 5 years. Never, ever have I seen the news in the past 5 years. My mom says I'm shallow, but I say, Mom, I'm protecting my mindset. Thank you. Because you'll hear about it anyways. If it's bad and everyone's talking, you'll hear about it.
Yeah, I think the other piece is there's two different types of news, right? And you got to surround yourself. I think you've got to surround yourself with the right type of news, right? The news you're talking about is news media. It's the headlines in the newspaper. It's what's on the evening, the 5 o'clock news. It's that stuff, right? But there is also a lot of news in like the business world about what's going on.
News. One that makes you inspired, makes you grow, not the ones that are just injecting fear in you all over, and then you're like frantic the next day.
Yeah, it's the same thing, in Florida, hurricane season's coming up here, not too long. Like I thought I saw like 27 days or 28 days, something like that. But it's like, I know people, and I can attest to this. When we first moved, the first year we moved down here, it's like we were watching like the weather like incessantly every day. So like, okay, what's happening in the Pacific? What's happening in the Atlantic? What's the next storm coming? Is it going to hit us? Like, well, most likely it won't turn into anything more than a rain event, and we'll keep it moving, right? In the storms that are going to turn into something big, we'll know about them. So now I watch the news like once a week, just for the weather, right? Just to keep an eye on it, or I check a weather app, but it's that same fear, almost anxiety, anxious moment that you're like obsessing over all these little micro storms that, if you're from Florida, you totally understand what I'm saying. The rest of the world, you think our alligators are like squirrels and they're everywhere, and we have a hurricane every day. So
and that's like the same if we even look at COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
The news around COVID and the fear injecting that the media does around COVID is ruining people. Like, you will see in the next 6 months to a year, depression rates are going to go through the roof. Anxiety is going to go through the roof. Like, all this news is really messing with people's nervous system. Like, they are going to be so all over the place, right? So,
no, I think they already are. And
you have to protect yourself, right?
Yeah.
You have to protect yourself in what you're watching, what you're allowing in your brain, what you're allowing in your subconscious mind. If you don't protect yourself, who will?
Yep. I want to also mention, or step back to, you mentioned about you have to let go of control as a business owner, because I think it's another piece, and it's probably the hardest thing for most business owners to do. I like the list piece of it, but I also was thinking about this going, I think you need to make sure that as a business owner, you're hiring people that you trust as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you're so afraid that they're going to screw everything up in your business, then why did you hire them in the first place? And like, as we were kind of talking about some of the other stuff that came into my mind, I'm like, it's a really interesting like perspective. Like part of letting go of control is trusting that the team and the systems around you are strong enough and resilient enough to take on the burden of being put in play.
I think a big thing as a business owner too, and I'll say about myself too, is trust yourself. Like if you have trust issues with yourself, good luck on your business, right? Like you've got to be able to trust yourself, the decisions that you make, the choices, the person that you are, the mission, the way you're doing things. And worst case scenario, if you do something bad, you take responsibility. And what's the worst thing about that? You learn, right? Yep. So this like beating yourself up or not trusting yourself or being mean to yourself, like all that's doing is ruining your business, right? You have to be, for sure, being a business owner and being an entrepreneur, you've got to have such thick skin. Like you've got to be so grounded to make it work, or it's never going to work.
Yep. You're going to sit there and flounder going, well, what happens if I do this or I don't do this? And then you're never going to make any decisions that are going to take you into the space that you need to move forward. And
you got to trust yourself. You got to be confident and you got to own it, the good and the bad.
Yep. So absolutely love that. I think that's also a great tip to cope as well. Like just own what you do. The worst case scenario is you're going to learn from it. I always jokingly tell, when I do leadership training, I jokingly say, what's the worst that's going to happen from this decision? And the first thing I ask is anyone going to die? Right? Yeah. With the exception of like, doctors, emergency medical people, right? Extreme circumstances. Most of the decisions that we make in business, nobody's going to die. So let's just keep it moving. We'll make our mistakes, learn from it, and go to the next, thing. So, well, I absolutely love it. We are getting to the end of time. I have been awful chatty today, and we are actually over time. So, I know. It flies by sometimes. So I want to leave the floor because I always like to leave every show with something that you can take away and apply to your business or apply to your life for improvement. So I leave the floor to you for your final thoughts today based on what we talked about. What's one thing somebody can take away from the show?
I think my final thought for business owners, for entrepreneurs, it's everything starts with you and everything starts with the mind. So I truly believe everything starts with the mind because I've been on both sides of the spectrum. I've been on the side that I've had crippling anxiety, and now I've been on the side that I'm so strong mindset wise, then nothing can faze me. Okay. So I've literally been on both ends. And I think it's so important if you want to be successful in life, if in your personal life, in your professional life, take care of your mindset. Everything starts with the mind. And if you're in good mindset, if you're in a healthy mindset, you don't obsess about control. You do trust yourself. You don't allow anxiety. You don't fear the unknown. You don't fear failure. So if you're thinking and finding that you're lacking any of those, go after it. Get a good coach, get help, get past it so you can be bigger and better for the world and for your family.
Fantastic final thoughts. I absolutely love them. Where can people find you?
So people can find me on LinkedIn. That's my main platform. If you just type in anxiety on the search bar, you'll find me. And they can find me on my website. It's www.theinnerroommate.com.
Fantastic. If you connect with her on LinkedIn, put in the message. Let's see here. Winning my anxiety in your message. That way she knows where you found her from. And we appreciate your time on the show. You dropped so many amazing nuggets of information. And this is such an important topic. I could have talked for probably another hour on this with you.
Me too.
So. I love it. It shows you're passionate about it. As always, we thank everybody that jumped on the live stream, and you can also find us on YouTube and your favorite podcast network. Make sure you drop a comment if you're catching the replay on YouTube, or follow us and follow us as well. And also make sure that you are dropping a review on your favorite podcasting platform as well, so that we can help more people out. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you coming to join us.
Thank you so much.
As always, it's really just a pleasure to share this information with everybody, and we will see you next week.
Well, that wraps up yet another episode of the Winning Tactics Podcast. You can find Adam on both the LinkedIn and Facebook platforms. And to support the show and ensure the success of the podcast, would you kindly consider visiting Patreon.com/Adam Sinkus? We greatly appreciate it. And until next time, from the Winning Tactics Podcast, remember, culture is how your team behaves when no one is looking. Take good care, and thanks for listening.